Hi, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen, Dean of the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and host for the Dean's Chat podcast. My guest today, Jim McDannald, is from Montreal, Quebec. He is the founder of PodiatryGrowth.com, which provides digital marketing and services for private foot and ankle clinics. He's also the co-host of a podcast called Podiatry Marketing. So I'm looking forward to interfacing with a co-podcaster there, Jim. He's also been a head coach, cross-country and track at the University of Quebec in Montreal from 2016 to 2020. He also was the communications coordinator for Athletica, right? Athletic Canada?
Yeah, Athletics Canada.
And you covered the 2016 Olympic Games, the World Championships in 2015 and 2017, and the Pan Am Games in 2015. Jim was a health technology writer from 2013 to 2018. He's a graduate of the William M. Scholl College of Podiatric Medicine. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Jim.
Thanks so much for having me, Jeff. This is an exciting opportunity. I've really enjoyed listening to some of the other podcasts in the past, so this is going to be a fun conversation.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to it because we can go a whole lot of different angles here, Jim. You know, we're already on Jim and Jeff terminology, but we go with informal on the Dean's Chat, so let's continue with that. So, you know, the best thing to do, I think, is start out with your new venture. I just think it's fabulous that you have podiatrygrowth.com, and it's obvious that that has kind of evolved over time for you in the tech space. Please share with our listeners what exactly you've got going on there.
Yeah, so basically from about 2011 till 2019, I had kind of a gradual career shift, and we can get to more of that later on if you want to. But what I found was that as I kind of got into some communications and marketing roles, some of my colleagues and classmates are really curious about, hey, Jim, like what's going on with digital marketing or my website, or I work with an agency and I really don't know what they do. So I really saw an opportunity to kind of reconnect with some of my, with the profession in a way, in order to really help educate some of my peers about the opportunities that are available out there and kind of what some of the higher kind of ROI opportunities are, instead of just kind of like, what is a Google ad or what is a website? What is a good website? And really try to educate and kind of create some material in and around that. And obviously provide some services as well with Podiatry Growth.
Well, that's great. So exactly what do you do then? I mean, you interface with doctors that own clinics and they're looking for ways to grow their practice, right? And,
yeah, exactly. Yep.
And then
yeah, exactly.
They don't really understand the social media space. So you're kind of covering that ground for them.
Yeah. So like, obviously people are busy, running their practice. They've got to take care of their staff, take care of their patients. And sometimes the marketing things are kind of on the back burner. So, what I kind of come in and do is basically kind of be a one-on-one consultant with a clinic and say, okay, you're in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Here's what your website looks like right now. What kind of care do you want to provide? So I think it's not only like what are the services or the technologies that they need, but they also need to kind of refocus on what got them into the profession, what types of procedures or what type of practice do they want to have is kind of that first kind of discussion. And it could be, a week or, filling out some forms and understanding what they want to do with their clinic. And then it's how do we kind of build a plan, kind of a marketing plan in a stepwise fashion. It's not like you don't need all the things at once, right? But, if you haven't done anything to your website in 10 years, if you have stock images instead of like pictures of you taking care of your ideal patients, there's a lot of different ways that I can kind of come in through websites, through things like Google ads, Facebook ads, helping people gather reviews for their clinic to really help them stand out in their local community and be visible. Because I think, not only do we sometimes struggle as a profession getting visibility, with students and other people, but we need to let people in our community know that we are the foot and ankle expert. And by having a very professional website and kind of online presence, it helps kind of transition that patient into your practice so they can receive the excellent care that podiatrists provide.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. It seems like the social media space is not unlike podiatric medicine in that there's alphabet soup out there, SEO, all these different search engine optimization and terminology. How do you simplify it for docs? Like when you go in and you talk to a doctor and you start talking about all these different opportunities, how do you simplify it for them?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And one of the things that people feel very familiar. I'd say people younger than us feel extremely familiar with different digital channels, but it's one thing to kind of be familiar with these channels. It's another thing to be, somewhat strategic or really kind of understand how to use them in a way to showcase all the services and care your practice can provide. So, it's really, there's different ways I do it. And I try to do a significant amount of writing on my website. And I also have a newsletter that I try to, kind of piecemeal it, because obviously if I spend 3 hours to you today talking about the ins and outs of, on-page SEO, off-page SEO, all these kind of things, your eyes are going to kind of glaze over. But if you kind of, what I try to do is create content through either the podcast, the newsletter, the website, just to kind of give people a little bit of chunks of data or information in small bits so they can feel, at least a little bit more knowledgeable than they were previously about what is SEO, what is SEM, what are these different types of things that I have that are opportunities, but it's not something we studied at Scholl or at the California College of Podiatric Medicine, right? So it's something that also I like making kind of I've been talking to some different professors and different staff members at different schools. For example, I went back to my 20th year Scholl reunion recently and had the chance to talk to Leland Jaffe, who was on your podcast recently, and just connect with some of these younger people that are in contact with the students so that they can be thinking about, if they want to go into private practice or they're going into a group practice and they want to be knowledgeable how to kind of get that visibility for the clinic or the practice there on social, because that's where a lot of people are doing their searches when they're looking for a foot and ankle healthcare provider these days.
Absolutely. So let's just use Google, right? Google's a natural search engine. And then when we use the term search engine optimization, I've got my own mental image of what that might be. Well, what would you tell a client? How do we get your name out there? What does that entail?
Right. So you're going to see this like with any kind of either marketing agency or marketing consultant. They're going to promise to get you in that top one or top three search results, right? But what's happening now over time is that as time goes on, Google's getting more and more cluttered, but I would say the SEO is kind of, how do you get visibility when people search for the terms that you want to provide, right? So maybe these are local terms. Maybe this is like, for the Milwaukee example, it's like podiatrist in Milwaukee, Milwaukee podiatrist, but maybe you want to do something into sports medicine, right? So, running injury, foot running injury. So it's kind of one of those things where, what are those terms or search terms you want to show up for? Obviously certain terms are going to be more competitive than others. If things like bunionectomy or foot surgery, we have big kind of corporations jumping into the search results these days with people doing different types of Lapidus procedures. Sure. So there's different kinds of return on investment as far as what you want to do. But SEO is really this kind of how do you get to the kind of the top of Google Maps, different types of search engines in a, authentic and genuine way, right? I think there's just different ways to build websites and do different things online that helps you get there. But it is kind of, there's kind of a checklist of things that have to be done on a consistent basis to build that trust, not only with patients in your local area, but also with Google and these different online platforms.
No, that makes sense. So what are different types of differentiation you see out there? Everybody's a doctor of podiatric medicine, but there's so many different areas that you can find expertise in and get a reputation in, for example. Are you finding that when you're helping docs kind of find their niche?
Yeah, I think that's a great way to put it, is finding your niche within podiatry, which sounds kind of silly. Maybe some people listen to the podcast like, well, I'm already a foot and ankle doctor, right? So why do I need, I don't need to niche down any further. We've got our specialty here. But when you really think about kind of the ideal patients that you kind of treat in your practice, they probably fall into a certain range, right? When you look in your schedule and it's a weekend ward and you love treating, sports medicine, or it's that high school athlete coming in, if you're like, I was big into sports medicine, that's how I kind of got into the profession to start off with. And, to help kind of people define that, you really have to build that online presence or that website or that online platform. So people feel when they look at your website, they think, oh, that's me. That's like, I need to go see that person because, they treated the University of Wisconsin, or they've treated these Olympic style runners. And it doesn't always have to be that by association. But if you have, I see a lot of kind of, I still call them basic or kind of generic websites these days, which, when you're getting started in practice, it makes total sense. They're probably less expensive. They don't require as much time on your hand. But, as you start to realize what you want to do in practice, having things, you don't want to have the list of the 50 biggest foot and ankle problems, on your website. Maybe pare that down to 10 or 15 things you really like to do, or the procedures you like to do. I think I mentioned previously, you need to have authentic photos of you taking your ideal patient, right? If it's footprints in the sand, I mean, that's not very specific to, talking to a patient to come into your practice. But if you can really get niche down into what you want to do and have, your online, your offline marketing, in lockstep with what you want to do, you're going to be much better off and much happier in practice, not only having a thriving practice, but, you're going to be looking at that schedule and be excited to come into work the next few days.
Oh, no doubt. So you got to find things that resonate with your potential patients. It's funny, Jim, when I was down in Miami, one of our clinics at Mercy Hospital, Jim Lucido was one of the docs there, and he was the Miami Heat doc. And I'll tell you what, if you're the doctor that treats the Miami Heat and the local colleges, and people would fly in to see Dr. Lucido, and I mean, he really took that niche, if you will, and made the most of it. And it works, totally works.
Yeah, there are people like Tom Shanka, like Rich Boucher, Amal Saxena. These are people that I looked up to when I was in school. And, if you really want to treat sports medicine, or maybe it's within dermatology, or whether it's in something like diabetic foot care or biomechanics, there's a lot of different ways to go about it. Obviously, I'm using sports medicine as the example here, but there's a lot of ways to really showcase the care you want to provide. And then that's going to attract more folks your way.
That sounds, it's a lot of common sense, right? But then thinking about it and then making it happen are two different things. So if a doc wants to reach out to you to podiatrygrowth.com, they just email you, or how would you recommend people get a hold of you?
Yeah, they can email jim@podiatrygrowth.com. This is not there's no hard sales. I'm happy to really kind of, like I said, my main goal from all of this, obviously I want to get some clients and work with some podiatrists, but really educate kind of our colleagues on this topic so they can feel like they're making the best decisions for them and their practice. But yeah, jim@podiatrygrowth.com. They can go to the website, look at it. And, there's, like I said, there's some different topics that I write about when it comes to podiatry and marketing. Obviously listening to our to the podcast I host each week with Tyson Franklin called Podiatry Marketing. So if you Google that, it's going to come up. But yeah, basically 30-minute kind of quick hit episodes. Maybe you can ride, as you're riding to work or on the metro, or if you're in the car, you can listen to them on the way to work. That's podiatry.marketing is the website. So people can find me there, and hopefully they can get some information from it. If they want to reach out and talk specifically about their practice, I'm happy to do so.
Now, you're reaching a milestone next week, if I'm not mistaken. You're going to publish your 100th podcast.
Yeah, that was actually today. Today we published the 100th Podiatry Marketing Podcast. Yeah, so we've been doing it a little bit under 2 years. Putting them out every week. I know you're catching up to us, Jeff, but it's been a lot of fun collaborating with Tyson. He's kind of the business podiatry coach and has had pretty unsuccessfully with his Podiatry Legends podcast. And it's been a joy just kind of bouncing ideas off of him and getting his take on things. Obviously, a little different perspective, him being from down under, but a really nice collaboration. And definitely people should check out podiatry.marketing if they want to listen to some old shows, or it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, kind of any podcast player that people are like to use.
Very good. So let's talk about podcasting for a minute. I found it to be just a wonderful opportunity to get to know people, to learn about different people like we're doing today. And it's amazing because you've got Spotify, Apple, and then you can even put it out on YouTube. And I found it just to be a lot of fun. And B, you get to connect with people that you might not have connected with otherwise. Have you found the same?
No, I found the same. Yeah, I just started kind of uploading them to YouTube as well. But it is this amazing opportunity. I think I did a lot of in-person. I was supposed to do some in-person talks during the COVID times. I ended up doing these kind of remote, conferences, which weren't bad, but just being on what kind of platform you're on, you didn't have that interaction, right? And I see with your podcast and some of the folks that are doing these kind of one-on-ones, it's a great way to reconnect, to network within the profession. It's also maybe a great way for people to connect to people in their local area. Obviously, we're two podiatrists talking about podiatry, but whether it's maybe a podiatrist talking to their kind of different people to refer, maybe it's their local podiatrist as well. Maybe it's getting on a vascular surgeon. There's a lot of education, a lot of information that can be made from a podcast. And like you mentioned too, it's available on YouTube, it's available on these different channels, but then it can be broken down into different things that can really help educate folks. So there's a lot of different opportunities with podcasting, and it's really what you want to get out of it, I think. But it has been a great opportunity for me to help educate, like I said, our colleagues on these different podiatry topics. But I was super excited too. When it clicked, it was like Jeff Jensen from Denver, was like doing a podcast. I was like, oh, wow. It took me like a couple of seconds to realize, like 20 years ago, that was me on an externship. So.
Right. And you just mentioned reconnection. I mean, when you emailed me the other day and said, oh yeah, I rotated you through your clinic 20 years ago. I was having this flashback in time, and you were a student at the Scholl College, and you were go out on externships. You had mentioned sports medicine before, and I want to evolve into your role as a coach and some of the work you did in Oregon. But let's go back to the beginning. You said you were interested in sports medicine, and podiatry kind of filled that need. Can you tell us about that journey a little bit at the beginning?
Yeah, so that was my introduction to podiatry in the first place. I was a competitive high school and collegiate runner, and I had my fair share of injuries. In my local area, I'm from a small town about 3 hours south of Chicago. And while there's some good providers there, it is kind of a smaller area. It's kind of about 90,000 people when I lived there. Not a whole lot of sports medicine scene, but I had this consistent lower back and leg issue, and ended up going to John Durkin in the Chicagoland suburbs. Him and O'Brien had this really bustling sports medicine practice up there. They had treated Sebastian Coe, who's an Olympic champion in the 800 meters and the 1500 meters, and those are like my races. And just so happens we found these guys up here, and they really helped me through some different injuries I had. And as I was at Augustana College, where I went to my undergrad, used to race against UW Oshkosh back in the day.
That's my school.
And all the big Wisconsin schools. So I was looking for a profession where I was kind of into biology, into kind of, what can I do with running to stay with it. During that time as well, I was building my team website. I was writing for the school newspaper about our team and other sports. So I was kind of in this mix of like, what do I want to do with my life? And I was actually building these websites. We had this Web Authors Guild back in the day, but it seemed very recreational. I didn't think, this is 1996, 97, websites were pretty plain back then. I'm like, I wasn't very entrepreneurial back then either. And I'm like, podiatry looks good. It worked for Dirk and O'Brien. Let's go that way. I think I'll enjoy it. So that's kind of how I was first introduced to the profession. Very
good. And so you went to Scholl, which I think is interesting. By the way, when you started talking about Seb Coe, I'm starting to show my age, because when I was in college, it was Seb Coe, Steve Ovett, Cram, Steve Lacey from Wisconsin. Those were your top 1,500 runners. So, yeah, they were amazing. Yeah, the UK squad is pretty strong back then. Oh my gosh, yes. So you went to Scholl, and then 4 years, and then you went to do residency out in Oregon, correct?
That's correct. So I got really into the sports medicine side of things when I was at Scholl. Like we had the joy of working at both the Chicago Marathon and Chicago Triathlon. Yeah. And actually some of the folks that you brought into your Northern Colorado program, Eric Jocula, Anna Weber, Ryland Johnson was my classmate. All these folks, I worked with there, and I was looking for the best fit for me. And the program out in Oregon, it's kind of like the runners paradise in a way. And I was really excited to get to match at Legacy Kaiser hospitals. I met some great folks, not only co-residents, but attendings. And it was a great 3 years. It was I'd say very intense 3 years. It definitely is a program where, they treat you like an intern your first year, and you're doing a lot of great rotations. You're doing burn surgery, you're doing vascular. I have some of the people I did vascular with actually did a procedure on me while I was still a resident while I was there. So it gives you a different perspective as far as the kind of educational opportunities you have. But it was a great 3 years there in Portland, and definitely don't regret it.
Oh, it's still a great program. I think we have 3 students from Arizona there right now. You're bringing back all these flashbacks to North Colorado right now, so that's fabulous. I know Ryland's doing well. I think he's in South Dakota, and I know Anna came back to Denver, and she joined Eric Jocula in practice there. And I saw them a few weeks ago because we did a program for student recruitment at Regis. So our circles are small for sure. So when you got out, now here's some of the stuff I wanted to start talking to you about. You worked in the Oregon area, and you actually worked with elite athletes. Did you work with Alberto Salazar's team and runners and that?
Yeah. So I think that's it kind of leapfrogs into something that's really important. I think whenever you're finishing your residency, it's really important to figure out what you want to do with that next step. And for me, to be honest, I didn't take advantage of I mean, I was working so much during residency that I didn't really take advantage of I would get out and hike and do some things in Oregon. But honestly, when you're working, felt like 80 or 90 hours a week, and the hospital food is free, I gained about 20 pounds. I was definitely a little more unhealthy than I am now. But I decided near the end of my residency, I'd got this little health thing. I got out a map and I said, what are those 5 or 10 places I want to end up? And, that was Boulder, Colorado. I know Tom Shanka was there. Sure. I've definitely been been to Oregon was a very interesting place. Flagstaff, Arizona, Eugene, Oregon, places like that, these active small communities. And so I ended up basically getting an opportunity, basically just kind of writing letters to different orthopedic and podiatry practices. And I got an email back from a practice in Eugene, Oregon. And definitely a high level practice. So this practice, the orthopedic surgical practice, I was the only podiatrist, and some of the older folks in my group, were some of the best, well-respected orthopedists in the U.S. We have Stan James, who had treated basically all kinds of runners. I think not a HIPAA violation, but I think he might have treated Michael Jordan back in the day. He also did, if you're familiar with running, the 1984 Olympic marathon champion from the U.S. Joan Benoit Samuelson. She had an arthroscopic knee surgery done about 6 weeks before the Olympic trials in 1983 or 84. And Stan James was the person who did that. So I had some pretty phenomenal mentors and some people that really took me under the wing in the group. And it was a very prestigious place to be. So yeah, getting to work with, I was kind of more, I spent my first 5 years of practice there, right? So I was kind of helping Stan or helping some of the folks, with these Oregon athletes or these high level runners, but definitely learned a lot during that time.
Oh, I'll bet you did. Well, that's exciting times because that is the kind of the heartbeat of running all the way down Dellinger and Bowerman and Prefontaine and all of the great runners.
I joined that group in 2006, and it was kind of a renaissance for the program. Vin Lanana was hired, and then basically they got the Olympic trials in 2008. Right. So I was there for that first Olympic trials in like 30 years, and the community was super amped up, and it was just a really fun time to be there in Eugene.
Oh, that's fabulous. Hey, I was just thinking, I was there once, and I took a couple laps on Hayward Field, but we went out to the McKenzie River Trail, and we ran a 20-mile run on some of the most beautiful terrain ever, and that wasn't that far from Eugene. I don't know if that rings.
Yeah, it's an amazing place. And actually, my wife has a sabbatical coming up, and I think we're going to actually spend a year there in 2024, 2025. So it's exciting to head back there.
Oh my gosh, that's excellent. That's fantastic. All right. So you were in practice, and then you had some tech background, right? And so that came back to the forefront. Tell us about your transition out of practicing into the tech space, because obviously it agreed with you and you got into some coaching. That must have been a tough decision.
Yeah, it was really hard. And, when I was in practice, I felt like I actually had a lot more time than I did when I was in residency. So I'm not a person that's very good about just kind of sitting around and being a passive player in anything that I'm doing. And while I enjoyed taking care of patients, I kind of missed the performance or the kind of happy side of the sport in a way. You get a lot of people coming into you, they're injured and hurt, and you can do some good things to help them. Right. But it was really exciting being in Oregon during this kind of renaissance of running, and I kind of got a little bit hyped up on it as well. So I decided to do some side projects. I had an iPhone app developed that basically, this is before phones really did the internet very well. I would say that if you try to, you'd have to hold your phone up like this close in your eye, because like Google and, different types of browsers just wouldn't, you couldn't really read the browsers very well. So I had an iPhone app developed about running news. I did a bunch of other little technology side projects. I was trying to figure out, how do I market my little app? And that kind of got me back into, writing again. I would sit up in the press box with the journalists. They were kind enough to give me a press pass. So I was writing about the team and some of the runners in order to kind of get some shine onto my app. So I kind of got into it in that way. And then in 2008, I met a wonderful woman from Quebec, Canada, and from Montreal. My wife was here, was in Oregon doing a postdoctoral research fellowship. And around 2010, 2011, she was looking for an opportunity to basically become a professor. We looked in Oregon, places are closer to where she's from, in Vermont and in Montreal. And just so happened she got an opportunity in Montreal. And at that time, I still enjoyed practicing, but I had this kind of itch to try something in the more technology space, in startup space. So I kind of moved over very, very gradually. So we moved in 2011 to Canada. I practiced here for 2 years as an associate for some practice, and it was interesting to see some of the differences between both, American podiatry and Canadian podiatry.
Sure.
And I would say that there's also Quebec podiatry because I live in a French-speaking province. It's the only official language here. And so that's been interesting. And then like I said, I kind of made this gradual transition, but never burning bridges, but just kind of following my interests as far as like where it was leading me. Like I said, I was enjoying being kind of on the performance side of things. I had the opportunities, we can talk more about it later, but to get into some different aspects of the running community here in Canada, because unlike the US, the running scene in Canada is a pretty small thing. Once you know a couple of people, you basically know everybody. So it just so happened when I decided to go to the 2011 World Championships in Daegu, South Korea. I was one of like 3 journalists. And one of the other guys that was there ended up being the Radio Canada, which is like the big national media outlet here. He ended up being he's going to become the president of the Quebec Athletic Federation. So I spent basically 2 weeks with him in South Korea. So you just get to know people in a different way. And it's been an interesting kind of transition, from the podiatry practice in Eugene to my time in Montreal.
Interesting. Do you mind spending a few minutes talking about the differences in practice? What did you experience when you went to Canada in terms of scope and things like that?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the misconceptions about podiatry in Canada is that, socialized medicine. Like the government's going to pay for, everything, right? So you don't have to, there's no such thing as private practice, but it's almost the complete opposite. There's a lot of fee for service here, especially in the Montreal area. I can't speak for other parts of Canada. I don't have as much experience. Most of my time was spent, all my time as an associate was spent here. But the practice is a little bit different. I think there's a lot less integration with the hospitals. I would say that the people that are providing forefoot surgery are U.S. trained. They went to U.S. schools. They maybe partly did a residency, and then they do a lot of smaller kind of in-office procedures. So I did some bunions, some hammer toes, kind of under local, at some different offices that are obviously have their own surgical suites here in Montreal. But that's kind of been my experience. I think it is there's a podiatry school here in Trois-Rivières I'd say it kind of leans more towards conservative care and orthotic care. But there are some people that go down to the U.S. They get trained there, have a residency, and then they're a little more cavalier, or you get their own surgical suites and do some more forefoot stuff here in Canada. But that's kind of what you have to do in order to practice in podiatry, at least in Quebec.
Oh, that's interesting. I've traveled around some, talking about wound care and casting and things. But before that, I'd spent some time in England, and it's a socialized medicine, of course. And if you went to see the doctor and you needed your bunion done, if it was January, they'd say, oh yeah, we can do it in November with the NHS. Or if you want to do it in a private hospital, we could do it this week, at the Nuffield hospitals or something. So I can see where that growth of outpatient services, fee for service, kind of lends itself to that environment.
It can be a bit controversial, right? There's some people that really, it is interesting. I went through a not too dissimilar situation where I had, a non-emergent thing, but definitely something that needs to be taken care of. And it was, 11 months until I got that taken care of, right? So it is nice to have that safety net that we don't have in the US. I would say that it was one of the things that allowed me to be a little bit more entrepreneurial and kind of like make the leap to like become a business owner and be entrepreneurial in Canada. Cause I wasn't very entrepreneurial besides doing that app, in the US. I really kind of went full force into it when I moved to Canada, and having obviously a spouse who's a tenured professor is helpful, but also knowing that healthcare is taken care of for us, for the emergent and non-emergent things here is definitely, gives you peace of mind.
Oh, no doubt about it. All right. Any questions you have for me? I mean, we're co-podcasters, so I imagine we've got a lot of common ground.
Yeah, I'm just curious, like how have you found it? Like, what's been your favorite parts of hosting your own show? I've talked a little bit off the top about reconnecting with people, but how have you found it? And what have been some of your, the things you expect or didn't expect?
That's a really good question. I think when I first signed up to do podcasts, I thought I was going to feel just like I do when I go out and give lectures and teach and, go to conferences. And I'll never forget, before my first podcast, I was super nervous. I was really nervous because what you're doing is you're putting something out there for public consumption. And granted, we can edit it, of course. But nonetheless, it's different than giving a lecture where you talk for 30 minutes, then you walk off stage and it's done, right? So I thought that was kind of interesting. But what I have enjoyed and thoroughly enjoyed was the ability to connect via Zoom. I come down to the studio, I get everything in place, get CVs, kind of get my script for how I think the podcast is going to go. And it always goes off script a little bit, right? Because, people have interesting stories and want to hear about them. But the ability for you to be in Montreal and me in Arizona right now and talk like we're sitting across the table is interesting. I don't want to get too verbose about this, but I think the other interesting thing is we know about people in our profession. We know that they're professors or they've worked with APMA or the CPME, but very few people come on a show and just say, hey, when I'm not working, I like to go bike riding, or I like to go rock climbing, or I got to do this or that. So I found those backstories have been very interesting. And actually the feedback I get, Jim, is that that's what the listeners and viewers really like. They like the whole story about somebody they know, but they don't really know,
No, I totally agree. I think that's one of the exciting things about the work that I do now is that I get to have these kind of one-on-one relationships with people, whether it's a former classmate or it's someone that saw my podcast or saw my video and thought it was helpful. And, we're really work together, kind of really get in there. This is not a large company, or this is a one-on-one consultation service that I provide for podiatrists. So yeah, that's kind of been very rewarding for me as well. Primarily, most of my clients are US based, right? So it is fun to I'm still an APMA member from afar, and it's fun to kind of be back into the profession and provide some value to our profession and to my colleagues. I think that's the thing that I get excited about every day when I go to work is that, just really kind of reconnecting but also providing value to the profession and the colleagues is just really, really makes me happy.
No doubt. Well, you hit it on the head when you said we didn't learn this stuff when you were at Scholl or I was in California. I mean, because this is new technology. So for you to be able to be on top of the new technology and be able to relate to your clients, I think is a tremendous opportunity for you and for them. So congratulations on starting your business and enabling it to thrive.
Yeah, I really appreciate that, Jeff. Yeah, it's been a fun, I guess almost 4 years now since I started in 2019, but I'm excited to kind of see where things go from here.
Very good. When I went into academics, I had visions of treating patients when I went from Denver to Miami. And then I was overseeing the PA program and the podiatry program. And then there's accreditation visits. Next thing you know, a few years slip by and you haven't seen a patient. So I've been out of practice myself, and I do miss aspects of it. I miss the patients for sure. And I miss training residents, of course, and training students. I really enjoyed being the clerkship director. So there's pros and cons to everything. And I think back to days back in Denver as being great days, but I think these are also great days, not being involved in a schedule every single day. So it makes sense.
I totally agree. And I think it's kind of finding the kind of intersection of your experiences and what you're good at, right? Like for you, you're a very positive, engaging person. Every time there was no, when it's like Jeff Jensen, when it clicked, I was like, holy cow, that's the positive podiatrist who was in Denver when I drove down from. I was there for that month and spent some time in the clinic, but it is one of those things where you can really, connect with folks. It's fun. Cause obviously 20 years ago, we were talking on Zoom to each other. We were, and I'm excited to kind of come back and do some conferences and kind of see people in real life, but it is nice to, have this connection with folks, after the fact, after years have gone by.
Well, congratulations to you. I admire you following your passion and your dreams. And obviously you had a connection with technology even before you went to podiatry school. So congratulations on all of your endeavors.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Very good. So to all of our listeners, thank you for listening on Spotify and Apple Podcast and Google Podcast. And if you're watching on YouTube, please become a subscriber and also become a subscriber to Podiatry Marketing with Jim McDannald and Tyson, right? What's Tyson?
Yeah, Tyson Franklin, yeah.
Tyson Franklin, of course. He's been doing a podcast for years, right?
Yeah, he had one called It's No Secret with Dr. T for 4 or 5 years. And then he's been doing Podiatry Legends, I think, for 5 or 6 years or something. So
heck, he's the legend. There you go.
Yeah, consistency.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you again, everybody. And Jim, I'm going to send you one of these Dean's Chat cups. I imagine you're working through multiple time zones. You're getting up early in the morning some days, and you might need a little caffeine in a Dean's Chat cup. So there you go.
Much appreciated, Jeff.
You're welcome. All right. Well, until next week, cheers, everybody.